Good stuff.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Revenue Revolution podcast sponsored by Joint Flows. And today we have the honor of hosting Annie Pattinson, who is an account manager at Figma. Welcome to the show, Annie. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. Very happy to be here. And how are you?
Very good. Thanks for being here. Do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about you and how you got to where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you said, I'm an account manager here at Figma, where I joined in March. So, I haven't been here that long now. But prior to that, I worked at Outreach for 3 years, where I had the pleasure of working with your wonderful CEO, Mick. And yeah, I started in sales development and moved into the account management side. And prior to that, I was in a creative agency, so a million miles away from SaaS sales.
Amazing. Well, it's great to have you here. I don't know about amazing as a choice of word to describe my pleasant co-founder here, Mick, but each to their own. It's interesting because Annie, I don't obviously know you as well as Mick does. And so I like to do a little bit of research before we get into these podcasts. And one of the things I do is obviously go through your LinkedIn. And it looks like you've had a very successful career being a top performer across a multitude of different roles as well. So there's great career progression that we're seeing throughout that as well. Talk a little bit about that and what you need, what kind of mindset do you need to be a top performer, not just in one role, but then moving into another one. And apparently it appears that you don't need that long to settle either. It just looks like you hit the ground running in everything you do, which is great. Kudos to you. But how do you do that?
Oh, that's very flattering. Thank you so much. I think for me, like a big thing, and hopefully Mick can testify this, is but when I joined, especially Outreach, and it's somewhere where you are working in a sales org that sells a sales software, and you're surrounded, like I am here at Figma, by some extremely talented people, and I learned very quickly, coming from a very different world, that I needed to level up quickly, and there wasn't going to be a lot of time to be slow. I had to hit the ground running, as I hate that saying, but that's really what I had to do. And one of the big things for me has always been around kind of self-improvement and how can I get better through my own development. At the beginning, it wasn't about like relying on other people or mentors, which is something that I've leaned on later in my career. At the beginning, it was very simply myself and my call recordings, which luckily I've been at 2 companies where we've had call recording software, but I would very simply kind of at the beginning of my roles, take my calls. I take the bad ones and I blocked out time twice a week at the beginning. Now I still do it maybe once a week. And I'd listen to my calls and I'd hear when I thought the prospect asked something, and I'd always click pause. And then I write down on a piece of paper, what I think I should say now as Annie, outside of the call environment. And then I'd press play and I'd hear what I said. And it was just a way that I could constantly kind of better myself, break bad habits. And it's something that I've actually done now throughout my sales career as I start a new role. And that kind of attitude is something I saw in other people that perform well, and something that I've now done to kind of constantly better myself.
It's amazing. And how often was what you were writing down as what you would have said outside the call aligned with what you said in the call?
Do you want the honest answer, or what I say on a public?
We like the unfiltered truth over here.
I think, yeah, we know what's nice to see is with my tenure at Outreach, towards the kind of end of the 3 years, it was getting closer and closer and closer. And now, my new role at Figma as the newbie and, having a whole new discipline in design, I'm finding there's a bit of a gap, but we'll get there.
Amazing. Well, one of my favorite sayings is every day is a school day. So
it's like you listen to the podcast. That's like the daily.
That's all I say. I say it in every episode. Yeah. All right. Let's
every time. Annie, what a pleasure to have you here. Like, big fan, as you know, and I'm glad you're doing well. I wanted to have you on the podcast because I think there's something very special about you around how you build relationships, both internally and externally, and you seem to be able to just like do it all the time, everywhere, every time. Like, you're a lovely person, like, obviously, but there's a know-how like, I'd like to know how you do it.
The
There you
special-
go. I am blushing as well a little bit.
the special, yeah, that's one way to maybe go bright red. I think internally, I've always tried to kind of, when you come into, especially a new company, it was a little bit different at my last place because I had a big onboarding cohort. But when I came in here, for example, you just want to start a little bit by coming in with a bit of a low profile and just like observing and learning and being so receptive to what people are doing, you know, spotting like who are the people that are, you know, doing well and like what can you learn from them and how can you shadow, and just you don't want to come in and say, hey, this is me, this is what I have to bring to the table. It needs to be a kind of like feedback and learning environment where, you know, you're just receiving and learning, and then, you know, a few months down the line when you've, you know, asserted yourself a little bit more and you've built some credibility, then you can kind of take what you've learned and start to kind of give back then your opinions on things or how you do things. And I think internally that's some advice my dad always gave me, even when you join like uni and school. It's like, keep your head low until you've like built credibility, and then you can, you know, flourish. And I think with my customers, it's just, I've always been about having a really customer-centric approach and like leading with empathy. And I think especially in this like environment, you know, there's a lot of people and there's a lot of reps out there that, you know, it's hard for everyone, but the reps that are trying to squeeze revenue out of their customers, especially in an account management role, or the rep that has a customer who's contracting or laying off people and are there, you know, fair enough, definitely try and see if there's other ways they can get return on investment, or they can look at more of your product. But if it's not the right fit, it's not the right fit, and move on. And, you know, customers will remember those reps that just tried to like push money down their throat, or, you know, didn't leave them alone in those times.
But there's sorry, I know it's usually like one.
Go for it, mate. Go for it.
There's obviously kind of, especially in sales, where there's an expectation to be a little bit painful and almost forceful to some extent to, okay, well, you need, A, you've got a quota, and B, the quota is based on a specific time frame. So how do you manage to keep that relationship sane and also set the right expectations internally?
Keep the relationship the same, did you say?
Yeah, and manage your manager's expectations at the same time, where they might be asking you to push a little bit more than what you're doing or what you feel is appropriate.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and something that I think about a lot in terms of, you know, managing that customer relationship, but also you've got to manage a number and a quota, and, you know, that's very important when you're starting a new role as well. And I think the best managers that I've had are the ones that trust me, that I know the relationship and I'm having that conversation. And if I'm telling you that there's no revenue there to be made, respect that, and I will go get it from somewhere else. And they trust me to go and do that.
You're hired. You're hired. Try
to Amazing. It's good. It seems like you know, a few guests now have used the word empathy quite a lot when we're speaking about how you deal with customers. And to Mick's point, it can be a little bit difficult because, you know, you've got to think about both ends of it, right? You've got a target which obviously allows you to earn more if you hit that target as well, but and in some situations allows you to keep your job versus not keep your job in worse conditions. So how do you go about actually identifying where these opportunities are in a way that's going to demonstrate empathy to your client base?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one in account management, and it's something that actually Mick and I work together on quite a lot. And it's the beauty of having, you know, a client base and being able to kind of, I guess, like break down that client base in a way that makes sense for the way that you work, whether that's like industry, location, account size. And you can start to recognize different tiers of customers. Some customers are going to be the ones that are just very happy, kind of ticking along throughout the relationship. And those are the ones that you give love to. It's a bit more of a hands-off approach. But then you've got some customers that are very invested. They love your product. They want to buy as much as they can. And they really are kind of your champions. And you start to kind of build a bit of a tiering structure. And that sounds awful. And I hope none of my customers would listen to this and think that they're in some kind of tier, but it's just a good way to kind of make sure that you're giving love to those who really need it, but then also having a bit more of a reactive approach to those that, you know, a bit more self-sufficient. So
that makes sense. It makes sense because not everybody wants hand holding all the time, whereas some people do, right? And what are you seeing? Sorry, Mick, I'm doubling down on the questions as well, so apologies. But what are you seeing within the market at the moment when it comes to expansion? Because obviously there's a lot of talk around consolidation of tech stack at the moment. And you know what that inadvertently leads to is, you know, it could be your software that's on the chopping block. So what are you seeing out there and what strategies are you deploying to overcome these challenges?
Yeah, consolidation is a massive one. I think it's something, I mean, I imagine you hearing that in your conversations as well?
Yeah, too many times.
Yeah, it's a big one. And you know, we hear the whole budget shrinking. We have CFOs coming into the conversations. Like you probably heard this in all of your podcasts. But I'd say, something that I've noticed, especially in this environment, the most interesting one for me is actually how informed the buyers are. So often when you're coming into these conversations with your customers as an account manager, because they have less budget and they are consolidating, and like you say, like some tools are being chopped, they come in with a lot of assumptions. I guess it's kind of like, if you think about it, if you have lots of money and you go shopping, you will go and spend lots of your money and you're not worried about if you buy the wrong thing, or you're not too worried about the consequences if you spend a bit too much cash. Whereas like if you don't have much money, you're going to have done all the research before, you'll have read the reviews online before you go buy that new TV because you don't have much money to spare. And it's kind of the same of what's going on now. I feel like customers are coming in and they've done loads of research before. They're making all these assumptions. They probably check with other competitors because they have to make sure that this decision is going to give them a good return on investment. Otherwise, they might be on the chopping board. So it's a different kind of technique that I'm finding, which is about when those buyers are coming in and making assumptions, rather than just going, great, this looks like a good opportunity, put it in my pipeline. They might ask for pricing, send over pricing, lo and behold, in a few weeks' time, I never hear from them again. And I'm following up like, hey, what happened? You were so keen. What I'm actually finding is when they come on with those conversations, and I often combat this by using a hypothesis. I love a hypothesis. But it's about peeling back and qualifying them, really getting to the pain and the business need of why they came to talk to you, and kind of taking them back through that process. Because then you know that actually, if that deal does stall a little bit down the line, you've now got quantifiable pain to pull them back, rather than just assuming they're ready to sign a contract when it turns out they actually weren't.
Those are the words I love to hear. Quantifiable pain. Well done.
Get those metrics.
This is really good. Like, I think you obviously have the right framework to get this information out of people in a scalable manner. And you know, we spoke about building credibility and having that connection with your buyers, but I think there's that next level of, so you know, we were preparing in a previous role where you were attending sales kickoffs, your client's sales kickoff, and then having a keynote presenting the product to your client's employees. Like, how do you get to that level where actually, let's have Annie on stage, you know, that's fine. She's gonna speak the right game. She's gonna she can represent the company even though she's not part of the company. How do you build that? I'd love to do the same. So, you know.
You could, of course you could. I have a bit of I have a few rules for when I first meet people. customers especially. And I think first impression is so important. And maybe that is kind of what helps me get to that stage. And in those rules, I mean, it's as simple as like on a first customer call, never ever start your Zoom with a presentation deck of slides. Always obviously have your camera on. Whenever I come onto a call, I'm bringing energy. I'm always buzzy, because I think, you know, it's like when you come into the office on a Monday morning and someone walks past you and they just give you a bit of a nod. And for the rest of the day, you're kind of like, oh, you don't really want to bump into that person again. Or if someone comes in and they're like, hey, how was your weekend? And then you actively want to see them again in the office. You know, it's kind of the same when you come onto a call with a seller. And then my next rule is never start by saying, you know, like I can see you're in the office today, or like where are you dialing in from, or all the classic lines that every single salesperson is going to say, because they will just put you in that box and they'll try their best to kind of get off the call because it's just a bit awkward. So my rule is that I always try and find something that's happening in their world when I first meet them. So for example, in a design world, I'll look on their website, I'll look on their profile, maybe they've done a website rebrand, maybe they've had an event. And I'll come and I'll say like, by the way, before we get started, I saw you did this like incredible website rebrand. Tell me about it, like how was it? And through their response, first of all, I can pick up what their style is like. And if they're more reserved, then I can then mirror that and match that and calm down. And I can also, then they know, and there's kind of this mutual respect that I've done my prep and I've researched them and I care about them. And then that kind of helps me then launch into my hypothesis about why we're talking. And that again shows some preparation. And I always think those kind of first 10 minutes of meeting someone for this first time is what then builds my relationships and like helps me get to that point, Mick, where you say, like being a bit of a strategic advisor that then they, you know, invite me to their conferences.
Nice, very good.
That wasn't short and sweet, was it?
No, I like it because like I do it all the time. I get people on. I say, hey, where are you calling from? Oh, where are you based? And it's such like I've asked the same question. I actually don't actually care where they're calling from. Or
That's not true. If any of our customers and prospects,
I love
yeah, where you're calling from. He loves it. He wants to know more.
He wants to know what part of London you're in.
He wants to know everything. No, I think that's it's interesting what you said, you know, like almost standing out from the crowd, right? Not ensuring you're not pigeonholed with everybody else by asking all the same questions, which I think is great advice. I also like all the research that you do ahead of that call as well, you know, what's unique, what's happened. You know, your example was like doing a website rebrand as an example, which I think is great. And so keeping on the topic of research, I think is very important in, I mean, any role that you do nowadays, but in particular within account management as well, because perhaps your market that you can go after is finite versus, or not finite, well, it is finite, but considerably less versus like your new business, new logo counterparts, right? You probably have a wider pool of accounts to go after. So what kind of research are you doing on these accounts to be able to understand, you know, things like org structure, you know, where the opportunities lie, what kind of products they'd be interested in, and so forth?
Yeah. It's something that I think is the most important thing in the world to have that research. I think as an account manager, when you have such a small clientele and they can tell very quickly, like, do you know my business? And sometimes you'll even be tested. They'll say like, you go, hey, nice to meet you, your new account manager. And they say like, so what do you know about my business?
Yeah.
And if you can't answer them, that is the relationship. Just, you know, you're working on the back foot. So for me, it's about, you know, obviously you get a handful of like internal data that can help you like support customer conversations, but you want to have a really good pulse on like, what are the growth plans of the customer? You know, what have they been up to? What do they care about? What are they posting about? You know, LinkedIn's great because you can build out these lists where you can follow your customers and you can see, you know, what do they have any new hires? You know, have they speaking at any events? Have they released any new products? anything that, is related to your relationship that can kind of start that conversation and make sure that you're coming in and you can advise them. And then they trust you to make recommendations. So, if you are trying to upsell or increase at renewal, they're going to care more from someone who really knows their business and someone who's coming on and is treating them like they treat all their other clients.
Yeah, credibility. If you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. That won't be my last one I'll say today. So
and it creates loyalty. I was having this chat with my housemate actually, because we have 3 coffee shops around where we live in Dalston, and these 3 coffee shops, none of the coffee is particularly any better than the other. In fact, the place I go to get coffee, I think, is about 20p more than the other 2, which is something like 60 quid a year if I add it up, which is mental. But because I go there, and when I go, they remember my name, they remember my order, they go, hey Annie, flat white, and they'll remember something from our conversation before. It kind of creates that loyalty, so I keep going back. And I feel like in a funny kind of way, that's on a smaller scale, that's kind of what it's like as an account manager,
building loyalty. Love it.
I've stopped drinking coffee, just so you know, guys. This morning I was at 6 coffee a days, and I felt it was just a little bit too much.
It's excessive. So now you've gone to 0.
I can't do half-hearted things. So I either I go like full on the coffee or not at all. I'm not being stressed at all. Oh my God.
I thought you've been a bit off today. That's what it is.
You've seen a few yawns, mate.
Annie, what makes a good manager and a poor manager? Like we spoke about trust and kind of asking you and then taking on the answers that you give. Yeah. What else is part of being a good manager?
Ooh. I think probably just a manager that, you get to know them and they recognize what is your craft or what is your superpower that makes you, not just as a salesperson, but also kind of what makes you tick, what motivates you, why are you doing what you do. And if they're able to kind of work with you in a way that not only brings that out of you, but also like they can expose it in your career, internally, if they're on customer calls with you, like it's something that they can feed off of you from. The best managers that I've had have always kind of recognized like what makes me the seller that I am, and will kind of fight for me to make sure that that is reflected internally and both like externally, like you saw Mick with, if I can speak at these events or if I can go to in-person meetups. Personally, that's where I find, the most value in my customer relationships. So they put me forward for that.
And you volunteer to help you, because it's really hard, right? And I've had many managers in more companies like where you would change manager every 3 months, 4 months, and you've got other companies where you keep the same manager for a few years. So sometimes it's hard to actually rebuild that relationship, get to know each other, and then actually get something from someone, not in a transactional way, but just like you said, like leveraging your strength as opposed to just business as usual, like one size fits all kind of things. Like how do you make sure that this happens when you get on with a new manager?
It's tough to make sure it happens. I guess like sometimes it doesn't, and it is something that does come from time, and 3 months with someone is a short amount of time. So first of all, if you can't kind of communicate that, then the next thing I kind of fall back on from a manager is maybe their ability to kind of take from the business and from their leadership and their kind of upward management, what is the kind of like initiatives of the business, what are the priorities, and feeding them back to me in a way that they kind of diffuse that layer of stress, I guess, and they feed it to the team in like a productive way, and they don't take pressures from the business, especially in this environment, and then just like push them onto the team. They have quite a tactical way of diffusing that, working out what's important to relay, and some things that maybe aren't. So if I had someone for 3 months, I'd probably like lean on that skill from a manager and hope that that was something they could do rather than like building that really personal kind of collaborative relationship.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good answer. Again, well done. So I guess like one of the things, and I know we're going a little bit back and forth over here, which tends to be the way we do things, a little bit chaotic at times, but I know earlier on you mentioned how it is you've been successful, how you hit the ground running, how you transition from role to role and so forth, and you spoke about self-development and how you do this, but you also mentioned later on in your career or more recently in your career leaning towards mentorship as well. Can you speak a little bit about that? You know, what are you getting from mentors and why would you strongly recommend? I'm a big advocate of mentorship, by the way, but what is it that you personally feel you get from this that you wouldn't otherwise have?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I'm happy to hear you're a big advocate as well, because it's been such a big part of my career. And I know it's something that me and Mick have talked about as well, like historically. And I think mentorship is, some people just go on LinkedIn and they'll find the best sellers and they'll be like, hi, can you be my mentor? And it's like, well, not really. But
So imagine, Annie, imagine doing this at a pub.
Oh, I actually knew it.
That's why Hitesh. So you find your mentors on LinkedIn, or some people do. Hitesh found them at the local pub after 10 beers.
It wasn't a local pub. It was a Covent Garden, and it was a very, very top caliber guy. Actually, didn't end up. Didn't. I don't want to ruin the story, but he didn't end up being my mentor. So let's carry on.
There's a story there, actually. There may be a separate pod for that.
Yeah.
But I think when you go to a mentor, you've got to have a really clear kind of predefined list of maybe qualities or that's maybe not the right word, but things that you're looking for to get from that relationship, or things that you're hoping you can learn from them, so that it's a really productive relationship. I've always been a big kind of, I hold the torch, like I hope, and I'm putting on something here in the coming weeks for kind of women in tech, and especially for me, because I came from this kind of more like fashion creative world, and I came into this world and it just made no sense to me at the beginning, and there weren't many women, and then now there are, and it's just fantastic, and I just want to keep that going. But I found some really incredible, of course, male leaders as well, but there's been some fantastic female leaders who have helped me kind of make sense and make light of this career and how to really like inspire confidence, especially in leadership and when you are in these kind of like executive meetings too.
So if we can stay on that track, that's really good, because we've been craving having more women representatives like of different departments on the podcast, and it's very hard. It's very hard to find. So we're gonna have Shelly from Gemini like this week, and it's for us it's like an incredible achievement, because she's wonderful and she brings in a different view on leadership and how it should be done. How do we, like, based on your experience, where do you feel there's a gap in enabling more women to take on leadership or just sales roles to start with, and then more leadership and executive roles?
Yeah, I'm hoping that, firstly, like I said, no, it's such a great guest you're going to have on next week. I can't wait to listen to what she has to say. But I think hopefully, because, you know, in our generation, there have been so many more women in sales. Hopefully, like, we will actually be seeing the, I guess, aftermath of that when we are naturally at those late stages of our career and like filling, you know, hopefully like the VP C-suite roles. It's just going to take a bit of time for those women to move up the funnel, so to speak, because I mean, personally, for both companies I've worked at now, there's been an incredible, you know, 50-50, I mean, not exactly, but, you know, pretty close to 50-50 split of male and female, which is something probably important to me, and I consciously chose to be in those organizations. But, you know, when I do speak with other sales teams or account management teams, like, there does seem to be more and more of that. So hopefully, you know, in the years to come, that will just automatically be, when we see more female leaders, it will then inspire more female leaders into the bottom of these organizations as well, or beginning of these organizations.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of that, and I think just in terms of balance, I think it's really important to have a balance of gender, and it's hard. Like, we're deliberately trying to get that balance right, but the pool of women we can choose from versus men is considerably smaller.
That's really interesting.
More like considerably, like 20/80.
Wow.
So yeah, we're trying hard as well to make the case, and get more people on the podcast to speak about it.
Yeah, absolutely. As we do, going to go in a different direction again. So I know we spoke about, I just want to go back to the account management aspect of things as well. And, because I think you're the first, Mick, I don't know, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're the first account manager we've had on the podcast. And so, we've had people from like onboarding, RevOps, new logo and things like this. And it's always the same when we speak about what's happening in terms with their customers, which is, longer sales cycles, more stakeholders involved and so forth as well. Right? With a different lens on this account management, where you already have that existing relationship, you already have an agreement in place as well. So, you're seeking more of a renewal and an upsell versus totally new piece of business. What are you seeing over there? Are there any differences versus what it was like 18 months ago, 24 months ago? Is it exactly the same? What does that picture look like?
Yeah, definitely a hot topic.
Yeah.
Very hot topic. I think that piece around like our customers are really informed about our additional product offerings is a big piece. And I think as you said, in account management, when you're on contract, one of the biggest challenges for a seller will always be that you are already on contract, you're a customer. So you have to be a lot more empathetic to their timelines, because ultimately there's a existing relationship there to protect. And I think sometimes in new business, when you come on a discovery call, you and I both know why we're there. If it doesn't work out, we don't speak. If it does, we might move to the demo. Whereas in account management, it's a different ballgame, because when you're coming on that call, they might not have no intention of kind of exploring additional product. They might be there to say, oh, can you show me how X works in your product? And you have to slightly maneuver the conversation, or understand potentially room for conversation down the line. And I have noticed now versus historically, it's not just enough for them to love your product and be a champion, that they'll want to buy as much as they can and be like the top users. Now, it's a massive, budget conversation. And I think that's where we talked a little bit about, these success plans and having kind of that mutual action plan in place, where you can then start to hold customers accountable to timelines, work together through the sales cycle and make sure that they're not elongated. And also giving them that empowerment, testing them as a champion, having all the resources available to them in a plan, allowing them to invite, as we've seen, like buying committees get bigger and bigger, you've got C-suite involved. Now they can bring in their C-suite onto that plan. And if they do that, they're your champion. If they don't, it may not be a deal.
Yeah, it's hard to get people to buy into mutual action plans, I find. And obviously we're in the market to some extent of mutual action plans. And there's a barrier to adoption, which is, oh, it's just another piece of tech. Oh, why don't you just send me an email? It's just one click, literally just one click from the email, and then you're in the plan. Have you found a good way to get this adopted externally?
Yeah, it's definitely something that I had the exact same feedback and thoughts. And I'd send the plan and they wouldn't log in. And I'd kind of message and I'd be like, hey, did you get my invite? And then, rolling effect. So I started treating it like I would a next step, getting it booked in on the call. So I'll share my screen at the end of a call and I'll say, this is a mutual success plan I've made for us. Based on you wanting to get something potentially implemented here, here's the timeline. have you got the invitation? Would you mind checking? If you could just accept that for me, and then I'll add all the resources that will help you in the evaluation into that. So it's almost like a bit of a give get. Like if you accept, then I'll share all the resources to help your evaluation.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
There you go, some tips for listeners. Awesome. Well, I think we are almost out of time. It's absolutely flown by. So appreciate having you on again. We do have one final wrap-up question which we ask, which is, throughout your whole career to date, what is your best memory so far?
Wow.
There's only one.
He's involved.
There's only one good answer.
He's involved in your memory.
The day Mick joined Outreach. No, there's been I've had so many great memories from two fantastic companies I've been at. Lots of traveling. But there's one that really sticks out, and it's probably the least glamorous location. It was actually at a sports bar behind Finsbury Square. Mick probably were there, and we were celebrating our end of fiscal. I was on an annual target, and it was my first year in a closing role. We'd been back and forth with a renewal contract for the previous kind of 2 weeks, lots of redlining and negotiating. And now it comes to the point where this renewal was going to be what took me over my annual target. And so we were all in the pub. As the VP at the time, their legal would ask for a call. We'd run to the office. We'd have a call with our legal team, run back to the pub to wait for a response, back and forth. Then finally we got the verbal. And at this point, we had the whole sales team, the pub was like crowding around my desk. I think the bar staff were even invested at this point. And then finally we kept refreshing. And we saw the contract signed at about 10 p.m. Everyone was like roaring on the table. My friend actually recorded it, and I sometimes watch it if I need some kind of end of quarter momentum. But it's just an amazing example of like really being part of that team where like everyone has just got your back and gives me goosebumps. It's very sweet moment.
Amazing. And me, I got goosebumps just listening to your story. Imagine how you feel. That's amazing, Annie.
Yeah, that's it. He's had the word bar and he's like, oh yeah.
Awesome. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on the show. We've really enjoyed having you here. That's it, guys. This is another episode of the Revenue Revolution podcast sponsored by Joint Flows. Until next time.
Thank you so much.
Later. Bye.
Bye-bye.